Hey, I'm Issa, and I'm learning to convert this van all by myself while traveling out of it as much as possible.
This week, we are installing a sensor for the gray tank, which means I have to drill a hole in my plastic water tank. That's nerve-wracking. Thankfully, the gasket is also a template, so I'm able to utilize that to mark where I want to drill and also for drilling the screws that this has to be utilized with. Words are hard, okay? So I take my step bit after deciding exactly where center is, and I end up drilling into this plastic water tank and creating yet another hole in a water tank, which is something you want sealed, right? And eventually this sensor is going to seal the tank. But the nice thing about this thing is it has a float. So it's going to be able to send data to my system telling me, hey, your water's getting full. You want to empty this, girl, okay? Here I'm just doing pilot holes for the screws that will screw the gauge into the tank itself. So this is the top of the gray tank. This is how it's going to lie in my setup. So I just insert it into the hole, make sure it fits, but you can also see hanging out from the side are some wires. These are the screws it comes with, and they each have gaskets on them as well, which is pretty rad if you ask me. There is no glue in this system, and it all is held watertight simply by the gaskets that it comes with. Now, I wanted to be very careful with all these and not overdo any of it. I didn't want to disrupt the gasket or potentially cause like a fail with the plastic, because although it's a little bit thicker plastic, it is still plastic. I just don't think it has a great durability, but also they don't make stainless steel or readily available water tanks that are easy to. Once everything was screwed into place, I also added mini cell to the bottom of the tank to protect it against the floor once it was heavy with water. And then I put water inside the tank to rinse out all of the plastic bits that got screwed in or drilled in while I was getting the whole level in place. I did multiple fill and shakes. There's also a small piece of mini cell on the side. That's where a piece of wood on the cage lies close to, so I just wanted to keep it protected. I also took time to let water sit on top of the gauge to make sure there was no leaks, and we were successful indeed.
If you are thinking about doing a van build, um, I recommend it. But also, just know that the work involved is a million times more than what you think. And the actual work, the actual building, is like 5% of everything. So there's the thought you have, then there's the research into it, and then you know how to do it. But then you have to get the supplies, and then you put it together, and then you realize your van's actually a little different. And then you do more research because there's this one component that you didn't really know about, and so you go ahead and figure that out on your own because there's nothing else out there to do it. And then you put it together, and then once you put it together, you actually have to take it back apart because that was just the dry fit. Then you also have to paint it. So, yeah. I'm at a point now where I left my van. I like to check the temperature in it, um, just to make sure, I'm not cooking myself. And I'm at the point now where I'm like, oh, it's only 100 degrees in the van. That's not that bad.
Once I knew the gauge was watertight no matter what, I went ahead and caged it, locked it up, put it on this shelf that I'm making that's going to supply or support my water system. So this top shelf on top of the gray water tank is where the fresh water is going to lie. But in the meantime, I also have a little side shelf that goes right over the wheel well that I want to put things on. No unwasted space, right? So here I'm just using the Schrader valve that comes on an accumulator tank to make sure it has the right pressure. Now, an accumulator tank helps you from running your water pump all the time. So a little bit of water will just sit in this device every time you want to run your faucet, but it won't always have to make the water pump turn on to give you water in the faucet. So right behind the gray tank and on top of the wheel well, I'm going to install this and also the water pump so that it's all just used up. I will say this is not a great use of space if you ever think you might have to replace it, which I later do with my water pump 4 years down the line. I did try to make it easy access though for one side or the other, that I could technically access these things, but just keep in mind me using this space wasn't necessarily the best use of space. Then I use some basically drinking water safe adhesive for the water pump and attach this filter strainer that it comes with to one side, and then I put that pump connect that with silencing hose to the accumulator. It feels like a lot, but basically it's water pump to accumulator to faucet. But I have to install all of these things before I put that official shell fully in on top of the gray water tank where the fresh water is eventually going to end up, or the freshwater tank. I'm also trying to screw this filter in a way that once the water pump is laying flat, that the particulates are going to flow to the bottom of it. And so this ended up being just a little tricky to get it exactly where it should be. Once I did that, I go ahead and screw the water pump down. I do not recommend this water pump. This thing actually failed twice, before it was fully installed, and then after. I had problems with it the whole time I've owned it, and I eventually replaced it, actually somewhat recently, 4 years later. So I'm going to link the one I use now that I like, not this one. And what I don't end up having footage of is this like silencer hose that I use that basically can absorb vibrations of the water as it's pumped from the water pump here to the accumulator. That way you just don't have this like constant issue with your pipes. The other hose I use is drinking water safe and flexible, so it allows for the reverberation. So that's the gray water cage install with a gauge. Thanks for watching. We get to regular video soon here, I promise.